Parents, mothers usually, would send in their names to Miss Brenda at Romper Room, KPLC TV. Would you please see my child in your magic mirror? And I would hold up this magic mirror, which was this shape, and I would say, oh, and I see my friend Karen and my friend Jonathan. I hope you had good fun at home with Miss Brenda on Romper Room. And then it would end. But I had this whole list of names. To this day, I have people coming up to me saying, you never saw me with your magic mirror. And I would say, get over it. It wasn't a magic mirror. Your mother never sent your name in so we could put it up on the teleprompter. A couple of things that happened while I was on the television. Those cameramen, oh my goodness. They tried everything they possibly could to break me up. They would put cartoons on the teleprompter and not warn me ahead of time when it was coming. We had show and tell on Fridays, and the kids would bring things. I had skunks that had been de-skunked. I had one day a young kid brought a little cigar box, and he said, oh, I want to show these. I said, okay, what are they? He said, they're Redworms. My dad's going to go fishing with them, and I dug them up for him. I said, oh, that's wonderful. And so he was right there, and he opened the box, and I looked, and the two cameramen were each waving $5 bills in front of the camera, and I knew doggone well what they were betting me. What they didn't know was that I had sons who were fisher people. So I reached in and I picked up the worm and I said, look kids, anybody want to play with one? They are fun. Look at the way it crawls all over my finger. Isn't that great? And the $5 bills went down on the floor. They were mine. They were mine. The kids themselves were always wonderful at the time.
Do be a car sitter, don't be a car.
I had participated in high school theater, and we'd been married for a couple of weeks, and I got bored. Harold was working, and there was a drugstore at the corner of Pujo Street and Ryan Street called Gordon's Drugstore, and they had a counter where you could go and get a drink. And we lived on Enterprise Boulevard, and I was able to walk down Broad Street and walked into Gordon's Drugstore, sat down at the counter, and asked for a cup of hot tea. This was towards the middle of September, end of September. And the girl behind the counter looked at me as if I was crazy. She, I can give you iced tea. I said, okay, that's fine. And 2 or 3 stools down was this lovely lady who came over and she said, you're new here, aren't you? And I said, well, yes, I am. And she introduced herself. And her name was Mrs. Alfred Roberts, Evelyn Roberts, whose husband eventually became mayor of Lake Charles. And she said to me, you ever been in theater? And I said, well, yeah. In high school, I didn't tell her that was last year, but I told her I'd been there in high school. And she said, you know, there's somebody I would like you to meet. And we finished our tea, and she took me across the street and up a dark and winding stairway and introduced me to Rosa Hart. Here was 18-year-old Boston-bred Brenda meeting the famous Rosa Hart, and she said to me, "You been in a play?" And I said, "In high school." She said, "Can you read?" I said, "Yes." She said, "Here, read me a couple of lines," and she threw a script at me. So I looked at the script, and I looked down the characters. I figured out which one would be the right one for me. And I read a couple of lines, and she said, "I'll see you at the theater tonight." And I said, "Okay." She was doing a play called The Pursuit of Happiness that was an American Revolution story of a young 18-year-old Yankee girl and a Hessian officer who were having a love affair and would cuddle with a bundling board between them. And it just so happened that there was a man by the name of Walter Stapfer who was here visiting from Switzerland who had the role of the Prussian soldier. And that was my first introduction to the Lake Charles Little Theater. And my husband joined in a couple of years later. He got tired of me having all the fun. And he played the role of Papa Frank in the first Dyer of Anne Frank. It was after Rosa had retired. There was another director here. And I think he probably did a play a year from then on. And I did as many as I could in between having children. I directed plays at the school. I directed Up the Down Staircase. I directed, oh gosh, I directed a play every year. One of the best things I did my first year there, if you can imagine this little Jewish girl doing a choral reading at the Christmas program with Medea's choir singing the appropriate songs and my chorale group doing the Christmas story. And it was beautiful, and I was up there, I was directing them, I had my script, they had theirs. Then the music would come in, and then they'd have a solo singing, and I had tears streaming down my face. It was such a lovely thing. Like I told you, there was no separation of church and state at WO Boston when I was there, which was okay. I was comfortable with it, and so were they. Jonathan, I don't know if I could teach now.
Yeah.
I honestly don't. The kids were so different there. They were so willing to learn. There was such parental support. The teachers were treated like professionals by the administration. I was fortunate to work under some of the best principals that there were. Understanding, empathic, sense of humor. I got the first Apple IIc computers in my gifted classroom at WO Boston. Oh, by the way, I opted to stay at WO Boston.